In this video, we're going to talk about challenges and affordances of online learning. So the first thing you need to know about online learning is that people struggle with online learning. This was a statistic recently released. 24% of undergraduate students dropped out of online courses between 2020 and 2021. It's generally found that the dropout rate for online courses is 10 to 20% higher than traditional face-to-face courses. Why? Well, there's been a lot of research on this because there are some advantages of online courses, and they seem to open opportunities for a lot of different types of learners in different situations. However, a lot of students are not successful. Some challenges are demographics. When people have a more stable home life, they have the technology they use, they have time to devote to the learning, they do much better than if they don't. Also, older learners tend to do better. Academic experience. If learners have more experience in a college setting or even just basic academic experience, they tend to do much better. Not surprising, but something to think about. Technical and management skills. If learners have the technical skills to operate their computer well, of course they do better. The other part is time management skills. Time management is more challenging online. And so that's another trait, another characteristic that can be a challenge if learners don't have those developed. Behavioral psychological traits, if people feel like they have an internal locus of control, so what they do impacts what happens, they tend to do better, which is true in all really learning, but it's particularly true online. And then those personal variables, interest, etc., motivation, obvious things, but are very important to consider in online learning. So how do we support this? How do we support students who might otherwise drop out? The first factor they found is course design. If the course is easy to navigate, if things are clear, the course provides student support resources. Students stick along more. And that's why it's so important to think about course design with online learning. Faculty interactions is the next thing. If students feel connected to the faculty, either through online video conferencing or just through email and through feedback and seeing a picture of their instructor or seeing videos of their instructor, they tend to do much better. And then a sense of community. If we try to make online learning so it's not so lonely, so people can connect with others, they tend to do better. Not surprising, but it gives us something to focus on when we're designing for online learning. Now, sometimes people do these research studies where they compare modalities. Modalities is just whether we're doing something face-to-face and traditional or we're doing something virtual. And what they tend to do, at least sometimes, is design some lesson and do it in person and then do the exact same thing online. That is heavily frowned upon because they're different. We have different types of learners in each modality. And then this thing called the medium, which impacts the method. Okay, that's what we're going to focus on for a minute here. It means that the technologies and techniques you use should change how you teach something. So you're not going to do the exact same thing online that you would do in person because it has different affordances. Okay? Affordance originally is a term that talks about how something can suggest what we're going to do or a perceived action. So often they use cups. When I see a cup or a teapot, I know instantly how to use it. I don't have to have an instruction manual because I see the handle, I see the spout, and I can perceive what to do. Another one is doorknobs. Doorknobs often are used as an example of affordance because I can see pretty easily. I probably have to pull that down to open it. I don't need instructions for how to do it. However, sometimes doors are not so good. Classic bad example of not using affordances is the pull-push doors where it looks like with a pull like this, it looks like you should pull it, but then sometimes they push it. So then they need to add words on it, and it's just kind of silly that we have to have words to tell us how to open a door. So you'd hope people would learn how to design that a little bit better. As we apply this to online learning, what we need to think about is what are the characteristics of online learning that suggest new possibilities? What are the things about an online learning environment, the technologies we use, the just atmosphere, the structure, that is maybe something different than face-to-face, or how is online learning different? This is one breakdown that Wilmark and Island have looked at when they're talking about affordances. They're comparing. So a virtual classroom, you have to have more structure than a traditional classroom. But that structure can be good in some ways. In a traditional classroom, you can have more one-to-many, where the teacher is talking to all the students at once. Virtual, it's easier to have one-to-one communication where the teacher is more individualized on each student because of the way time works. We're collapsing space and time, so it allows more of that. When we talk about reconciliations, that has to do with understanding how students are feeling and such. And so in a traditional classroom, you can just look and observe students and what they're doing. When you're in a virtual classroom, you don't have that advantage. It's a disadvantage online, but you can do things like having students fill out surveys, submit their feelings about things. So then instead of just getting a general sense, you end up with a very specific understanding of how all the students are doing. Traditional classroom, there's structure, everyday life versus hopefully some peace and quiet when people are working online. Some people like that, some people don't. You can have the visual bonding, which you see in a classroom. Sometimes you don't see this in virtual classrooms because they're in back channels. For example, I taught a course that had their own WhatsApp group, so I knew that they were talking about the course in their WhatsApp group. And I had to ask specific students how the students were feeling about it, because I could not address problems if they just talked about it in a back channel without letting me know. They talk about real time versus right time. So in virtual classroom, people can learn in time and space. Both of them reach certain students. And this is something I agree with. I don't think online learning is for everyone. I think some people do much better with online learning than others. Okay. Ultimately, online is different. We learn differently, and so we need to design it differently. There have been a lot of talk about how to do this. I just want to talk briefly about this Ecology of E-Learning by Cope and Kalantzis. They developed this in pretty early days of e-learning, and they call them the Affordances of e-learning. I want you, as we're going through this, to think about which of these do you think are really an affordance or a specific thing of e-learning, and which are things that maybe we could do in face-to-face learning just as well if we were intentional about it. Okay, so the first is ubiquitous learning. We can learn anywhere and anytime. That's the collapsing of time and space where people can follow their own schedules, and that's often why people choose to take online courses. It also means that the way we interact and the tools we use have to accommodate that. So when we have discussions or interactions, we have to find ways to support that across time. Active knowledge making, this comes to, instead of more of a lecture situation, actively learning, finding your own resources, exploring on your own. Multimodal meaning, so the ability to use text, media, sound, data, a whole bunch of different resources to understand something. Recursive feedback, which is formative assessment from the instructor. So when I'm teaching online, it's really important to me that I'm able to give feedback to the learners because that is my main contact with them. It helps me have a more individual view on students that I can't necessarily have the same way of in a face-to-face classroom because there's just not really time. Collaborative intelligence, knowledge you can reach for and use is what they use for this. It's more about like the online system that we can draw upon in other people, and we don't really have like one teacher in charge. Well, we kind of have one teacher in charge, but we can look at everyone's ideas, even the people who are usually quiet that wouldn't normally speak up in a class. A lot of time they do better online. Metacognition, thinking about thinking, we can support that through discussion boards, other things that every student has to answer. Differentiated learning, each according to their interest and need. So which of these do you think are particularly supported by online learning? For me, the main things are ubiquitous learning, where we can learn anytime and anywhere. I think the multimodal meaning making is particularly powerful online because it's easier to use videos as resources and such. You could do it face to face, but it's easier to integrate that into an online course. I mentioned with the recursive feedback, I could easily give individual feedback to students face to face, but it just feels different. It feels less personalized because I see, just because of the time that I spend on it. Where online, once I put the course up, I don't have to lecture or go to class. Instead, I can spend that time giving feedback. And then I think those are the main ones. I think there is something to be said for the collaborative intelligence, where especially for people who normally struggle in school, they're quieter, they have a disability, they can be a more equal participant in learning. And I like that about online learning. So, takeaways. We must carefully design online courses to support learners, remembering the challenges that learners have. We need to put in supports that can help people be successful. Online learning is different from a traditional classroom, so we have to do something different than the normal procedures we would use if it was a face-to-face class. And then we can improve course design by focusing on the affordances of online learning. What is it about online that is special? And how can we emphasize those for a different type of course design and different type of learning than we would have face-to-face? Thanks for watching.